The air in Rome, even on the sunniest of days, carries a weight, a palpable sense of ages past pressing in on the present. And at its very core, within the towering walls of Vatican City, this sensation intensifies 1,000-fold. It is a place built on layers of history, faith, and, some might whisper, secrets buried deeper than the bones of St. Peter himself. Imagine, for a moment, stepping away from the throngs in St. Peter's Square, beyond the Swiss Guard in their anachronistic splendor, past the opulent halls and art-laden corridors accessible to the public. Imagine venturing deeper into a labyrinth known only to a select few, where the echoes of footsteps are swallowed by ancient stone, and the scent of old parchment hangs heavy, undisturbed by the passage of centuries. It is here, in this conceptual heart of the Vatican, that a persistent, tantalizing rumor has taken root, a whisper that speaks of a room unlike any other. Not a grand archive, cataloged and meticulously maintained, but something far more enigmatic. A secret chamber, perhaps small and unassuming, perhaps vast and forgotten, filled to overflowing with scrolls that have never seen the light of modern scholarship, their contents unread, their wisdom or their warnings entirely unknown. This isn't a mere flight of fancy, born of overactive imaginations fueled by popular fiction. The Vatican Apostolic Archives, formerly known as the Secret Archives, are themselves a source of endless fascination, housing an estimated 53 miles of shelving, containing documents spanning over 12 centuries. The sheer volume is staggering, and while much has been cataloged and made available to qualified researchers, the process is painstaking, and the archives are not without their mysteries. But the legend of this room, this specific, uncatalogued and deliberately concealed cache of scrolls, transcends even the known immensity of the official archives. It suggests a repository of knowledge deemed too sensitive, too potent, or perhaps too unsettling for even the most restricted circles of ecclesiastical scholarship. What could be contained within such a place? The mind reels at the possibilities. Are these the fabled missing books of the Bible? Texts hinted at in apocryphal writings, but long thought lost to the ravages of time or deliberate suppression? Could they be personal correspondences of early church fathers, revealing insights or doubts that would challenge established dogma? Or perhaps they delve into even older, pre-Christian mysteries, knowledge absorbed by the early church as it spread, then quietly locked away, deemed incompatible with the burgeoning faith. The very idea of such a hoard existing within the Vatican, an institution that has stood as a central pillar of Western civilization for 2 millennia, is enough to send shivers down the spine of any historian, theologian, or seeker of esoteric truths. It speaks of a continuity of knowledge, or at least of preservation, that defies our modern understanding of information control. In an age where data is disseminated globally in an instant, the thought of ancient wisdom remaining deliberately untouched, unread, and uninterpreted for centuries, perhaps millennia, is almost an affront, a delicious, irresistible challenge to our thirst for understanding. The Vatican, for all its outward declarations and spiritual guidance, has always maintained an aura of inscrutability, a sense that not all its cards are on the table. This rumored room of unread scrolls becomes the ultimate symbol of that hidden dimension, a tangible representation of knowledge withheld, of history held in suspense. The whispers persist, passed down through hushed conversations, hinted at in obscure texts, a tantalizing breadcrumb trail leading towards something potentially monumental, something that could redefine our understanding of the very foundations upon which much of our world is built. The heart of this city-state, so often seen as a beacon of revealed truth, might just be guarding its most profound secrets in the dark. What secrets, then, might these hypothetical papyri and parchments cradle, preserved against the gnawing teeth of time and the perhaps more deliberate erasures of ecclesiastical authority? The possibilities unfurl like the very scrolls themselves, each layer revealing a deeper potential mystery. Could they contain gospels that once circulated freely amongst early Christian communities, narratives of Christ's life and teachings that offered different perspectives, perhaps more human, more mystical, or even more revolutionary than those canonized at Nicaea and subsequent councils? Imagine a Gospel of Mary Magdalene, not as a fragmented Gnostic text, but a complete contemporaneous account from one of Jesus' closest confidants, offering insights into his ministry, his views on women, or the inner dynamics of his circle that would radically reshape our understanding. Or perhaps a Gospel of Judas that paints him not as a simple betrayer, but as a figure acting under divine instruction, a necessary catalyst in a cosmic drama far more complex than the accepted narrative allows. The early centuries of Christianity were a crucible of diverse beliefs, a vibrant ecosystem of theological interpretations, many of which were later branded as heresies and systematically suppressed. What if original, untainted versions of these heretical texts lie dormant, waiting to challenge the victor's version of history? Beyond alternative gospels, consider the realm of forbidden knowledge, the esoteric undercurrents that have always flowed beneath the surface of Orthodox religion. The early church did not spring fully formed into a vacuum. It grew in a world steeped in Hellenistic philosophy, Egyptian mystery cults, Jewish mysticism, and Gnostic cosmology. Could these unread scrolls detail the syncretic practices, the absorbed wisdom, or the spiritual technologies that were later deemed too dangerous, too pagan, or too empowering for the laity? Perhaps there are alchemical formulae attributed to early desert fathers, not for transmuting lead into gold, but for the spiritual transmutation of the soul, using symbols and processes later sanitized or allegorized beyond recognition. Or star charts, not for mere navigation, but for understanding celestial influences on human destiny and divine events, a form of sacred astrology that the Church officially condemned while perhaps secretly consulting. Imagine treatises on the nature of angels and demons, far more detailed and unsettling than anything in canonical scripture, or practical guides to visionary states and communication with other realms. Knowledge deemed too potent for unsupervised minds. The line between miracle and magic, between divine revelation and occult insight, was often perilously thin in antiquity. These scrolls might map that forgotten borderland. And then there are the potential revelations that could directly shake the foundations of faith and the authority of the institution itself. What if there are letters, private journals, or internal communiques from pivotal figures in church history, early popes, influential bishops, or saints, that reveal profound personal doubts, theological disagreements that were never resolved but merely suppressed, or even evidence of political machinations and compromises made in the pursuit of power that would tarnish the carefully constructed image of unwavering divine guidance? Perhaps records exist of early councils where decisions were far from unanimous, where significant minorities held views that, if known, would legitimize contemporary theological dissent. Or even more startling, what if there are prophecies, not vague apocalyptic warnings, but specific, historically verifiable predictions that were deliberately hidden because their fulfillment, or their failure to materialize, posed an uncomfortable challenge to the Church's claims of prophetic insight or its interpretation of God's plan? The discovery of even a single, authenticated document of this nature could send ripples, if not shockwaves, through centuries of established doctrine and tradition. The dust on these scrolls is not merely the accumulation of time, it is the sediment of choices made, paths not taken, and voices deliberately silenced. The wisdom they might contain is not just ancient, it is potentially transformative, capable of reigniting old debates and forcing a profound reevaluation of what we think we know about one of the world's most influential institutions and the spiritual narratives that have shaped civilizations. But who, then, are these silent sentinels, these guardians of sealed wisdom, and what compelling force or ancient injunction dictates their vigilance in keeping such profound secrets locked away from the eager gaze of the world? It is unlikely to be a simple matter of bureaucratic inertia or a forgotten filing cabinet. The very nature of the rumored contents, potentially faith-shattering, historically revisionist, or esoterically potent, suggests a deliberate and carefully maintained guardianship, a tradition of silence passed down through generations. Are they a clandestine order within the Vatican? A society whose existence is as secret as the scrolls they protect? Perhaps a select few cardinals or high-ranking members of the Curia, bound by oaths that predate modern institutional structures, who inherit this solemn duty alongside their more public responsibilities. The image comes to mind of shadowy figures, their identities known only to each other, meeting in chambers far removed from the Vatican's daily operations, perpetuating a sacred trust whose origins may be shrouded in antiquity. Their motivations would likely be complex, a tapestry woven from threads of piety, pragmatism, and perhaps even a touch of fear. Foremost, undoubtedly, would be the perceived need to protect the flock, to shield the faithful from knowledge deemed too destabilizing. If these scrolls contain narratives that contradict core tenets of belief, or reveal uncomfortable truths about the Church's historical development, their release could unleash a crisis of faith, a spiritual earthquake undermining centuries of devotion and authority. The guardians might see themselves not as suppressors of truth, but as responsible stewards, carefully curating what humanity is ready to receive, believing that some revelations, however true, could do more harm than good, if unleashed prematurely or without the proper context, a context they alone might feel qualified to provide, or perhaps one that is never meant to be fully provided. Then there is the element of power, not necessarily in a Machiavellian sense, but the inherent power that comes with possessing unique and transformative knowledge. To hold the keys to such secrets is to occupy a position of immense, albeit hidden, influence. Perhaps the guardians believed that this knowledge, if widely disseminated, could be misused by hostile forces seeking to discredit the Church, by fanatics seeking to twist its meaning for their own ends, or simply by a public unprepared for its implications. They might see their role as a bulwark against chaos, a necessary filter in a world prone to misinterpretation and extremism. An ancient oath could also be at play, a vow made by the earliest recipients or discoverers of these texts, perhaps to protect them from persecution during times of upheaval, an oath whose original context is lost but whose imperative remains binding. Imagine a lineage of protectors, each initiated into the secret, burdened by the weight of this responsibility, understanding that to break the vow would be a betrayal of immense proportions, a spiritual transgression with unimaginable consequences. The very mechanics of this secrecy would be fascinating. How is the knowledge of the room's existence, its location, and its contents passed on? Is it through coded messages, oral traditions whispered from mentor to successor, or rituals enacted in the dead of night? The silence itself becomes a living entity, actively maintained, not merely a passive absence of sound. It would require immense discipline, unwavering loyalty, and a profound conviction in the necessity of their task. These are not mere librarians. They are initiates into a profound mystery, gatekeepers standing between a slumbering archive and a potentially awakened world. Their silence is not empty. It is pregnant with the weight of unread words, of histories untold, and of a truth held in abeyance, perhaps waiting for a prophesied time, or perhaps destined to remain forever under the watchful eyes of these devoted, enigmatic custodians. Their commitment, whether born of fear, faith, or fealty to an ancient command, forms an invisible, impenetrable barrier around this hypothetical chamber of scrolls. Through the long corridors of time, has no one else sensed this profound silence, this intellectual vacuum at the heart of such a repository of power and faith? Surely, the rumor of unread scrolls, of a deliberately sequestered archive, has not merely sprung into existence in our modern conspiracy-minded age. It is more likely a perennial whisper, an echo that has resonated through centuries, picked up by inquisitive minds, by scholars who felt a dissonance in the historical record, or by mystics attuned to the subtle energies of hidden knowledge. Imagine the renegade monk poring over ancient manuscripts in a scriptorium, who stumbles upon a cryptic reference, a marginal note hinting at texts deemed too perilous for the uninitiated, or the ambitious cardinal, driven by a thirst for deeper understanding or perhaps a more worldly desire for leverage, who devotes secret hours to piecing together fragmented clues, searching for a pattern in the Vatican's vast holdings that points to something deliberately excluded. There are stories, apocryphal perhaps, but persistent, of certain figures in history who seemed to possess knowledge or insights that were out of sync with their era, hinting at access to unconventional sources. Think of the Renaissance magi, like Pico della Mirandola, who sought to synthesize all forms of wisdom, Christian, Jewish, and pagan. Did their quests lead them to the periphery of such a secret, perhaps catching a fleeting glimpse, or hearing a guarded admission that fueled their syncretic visions? Or consider the more shadowy organizations, the secret societies that have long been rumored to have infiltrated or operated in parallel with established religious institutions. Could groups like the Rosicrucians, with their claims of ancient hidden wisdom, or certain esoteric branches of Freemasonry, have pursued leads, their members perhaps even holding positions within the Vatican that allowed them to conduct discreet inquiries? Their very charters often speak of preserving lost knowledge and seeking enlightenment beyond orthodox teachings. The clues themselves would not be overt. They would be history's faint echoes, as subtle as a half-erased line in a palimpsest or an enigmatic symbol carved into an obscure corner of a Vatican courtyard. Perhaps a particular pope, known for his scholarly pursuits or his interest in the arcane, suddenly initiated building works in a little-used section of the Apostolic Palace, works whose true purpose was never fully explained. Or a visiting scholar, granted limited access to the archives, might later write in a private letter of a strange, unaccountable gap in a particular series of documents, or of a librarian who grew evasive when certain pre-canonical texts were mentioned. These are not smoking guns, but rather the faint scent of smoke, enough to make a dedicated seeker pause and wonder. Even the architecture of the Vatican itself, a sprawling complex of buildings added over centuries, with its layers of construction and its myriad of undocumented passages and chambers, could conceal such a secret. A forgotten doorway, bricked up centuries ago, its existence only hinted at in an old blueprint or a builder's anecdotal account, could lead to the fabled room. These seekers, if they existed, would have faced formidable obstacles. The guardians, as we've imagined them, would be masters of deflection and misdirection. Any overt search would likely be met with polite denials, bureaucratic entanglements, or perhaps even subtle warnings. The pursuit would require immense patience, discernment, and a willingness to operate in the shadows, to read between the lines of official histories, and to listen to the whispers that others dismiss as mere folklore. Yet the very persistence of the legend suggests that these echoes, however faint, have continued to sound. Each generation might produce a new investigator, inspired by the fragmentary evidence left by their predecessors, adding their own piece to the puzzle, keeping the quest alive. They are the unsung heroes, or perhaps the unsung obsessives of this grand historical mystery, their efforts largely unrecorded, their near misses and fleeting insights lost to time, yet contributing to the enduring mystique of that secret room, that repository of unread scrolls, waiting silently for a moment of revelation that may never come, or may be just beyond the next turn in history's labyrinthine path. Imagine, then, the cataclysmic, exhilarating, and perhaps terrifying moment of revelation. What if, through some unforeseen circumstance, a political upheaval within the Vatican, a crisis of conscience among the guardians, an accidental discovery during renovations, or even a deliberate, calculated decision that the time is finally right, these unread scrolls were brought forth from their centuries-long slumber? The immediate impact would be a maelstrom. Scholars from every conceivable discipline would descend upon Rome, clamoring for access, their intellectual appetites whetted by generations of rumor and speculation. The media landscape would explode, with every detail, every translated fragment, every scholarly debate broadcast globally, dissected, and endlessly interpreted. The initial wave would be one of sheer, unadulterated sensation. But beyond the immediate furor, how would the contents of these scrolls, once deciphered and authenticated, begin to reshape our deeply ingrained understanding of the past? If they contain, for instance, verifiable alternative accounts of early church history, perhaps detailing suppressed theological movements that were far more widespread or intellectually robust than previously acknowledged, it would necessitate a profound rewriting of historical narratives. The neat, linear progression from Christ to the modern church could fracture, revealing a far more complex, contentious, and human story. If they shed new light on the historical Jesus, offering more detailed or contradictory accounts of his life, his teachings, or his intentions, the very foundations of Christian theology would be subject to intense reevaluation. Doctrines built upon specific interpretations of existing scriptures might find themselves standing on shakier ground. The discovery of lost philosophical treatises from antiquity, or scientific knowledge that predates its accepted discovery by centuries, would similarly force a recalibration of our understanding of intellectual history, challenging our notions of progress and the supposed Dark Ages. The ripples would extend far beyond academia, touching the very fabric of present-day faith and society. For believers, such revelations could be a profound test, either strengthening faith through a richer, more nuanced understanding, or deeply unsettling it by challenging long-held certainties. New denominations or spiritual movements might arise, inspired by these rediscovered ancient paths, while established institutions might face internal divisions and calls for radical reform. The political and social implications could be equally significant. If the scrolls revealed, for example, historical interactions or agreements between the early church and other powers that cast current geopolitical alliances or conflicts in a new light, the ramifications could be far-reaching. The very authority of institutions that have claimed a direct, unbroken line to divine truth would be subject to unprecedented scrutiny. And what of the future? The unveiling of such profound hidden knowledge could act as a catalyst for a new era of intellectual and spiritual inquiry. If these scrolls contained, as some might hope, forgotten wisdom about sustainable living, conflict resolution, or the cultivation of human consciousness, they could offer invaluable tools for navigating the complex challenges of our modern world. They might inspire a new renaissance, a re-engagement with ancient wisdom not as a relic of the past, but as a living resource for shaping a more enlightened future. Of course, the potential for misuse, for deliberate misinterpretation to fuel new conflicts or ideologies, would also be immense. The act of revelation would not be an end, but a beginning, the start of a long, arduous, and potentially transformative process of integration, debate, and reinterpretation. The unread scrolls, once brought into the light, would cease to be a mere legend. They would become an active, dynamic force, compelling humanity to confront its past anew, to question its present assumptions, and to perhaps, just perhaps, chart a different course for the ages to come. The silence of the Vatican secret room, if broken, would unleash a torrent of voices from the past, demanding to be heard, and in hearing them, we might find ourselves irrevocably changed. The currents of this narrative now begin to slow. The echoes of ancient whispers soften. We have journeyed through the speculative corridors of the Vatican, peered into the imagined darkness of a room filled with untold stories, and considered the silent vigil of those who might guard such secrets. The weight of centuries, the allure of hidden knowledge, and the profound human desire to understand our origins and our place in the grand tapestry of existence have been our companions. Whether such a room truly exists, or whether it remains a potent symbol of all that is lost, suppressed, or yet to be discovered, the quest itself enriches us. It reminds us that history is not a closed book, but an ongoing conversation, with new pages waiting to be turned, new voices waiting to be heard. As the light fades on this particular exploration, we are left not with definitive answers, but with a renewed sense of wonder, an appreciation for the enduring power of mystery, and a quiet gratitude for the journey of imagination. Thank you for joining this exploration into the heart of a captivating enigma. The search for understanding, like the flow of a great river, continues ever onward,